Ladies, we are in Chapter 5, Goal 12, and we finished through Roman numeral 1 in class today, so we're down under Roman numeral 2. And we want to find the exact values for the half angle of sine, cosine, and tangent. We know that we're going to be solving for the half angle for each of these. So I want you to begin by writing out the expansion for the half angle for sine and the half angle for cosine. So if you'll take a moment and look at your formula sheet and list the expansion for each of these. Okay, now that we have the expansion, we know that for the half angle for both sine and cosine, we need the cosine of angle x. So the nice thing about Roman numeral 2a is you've been given the cosine of angle x. So it is not necessary to draw a triangle. So let's go on and fill in that information now. I want you to pause the screencast and fill these in and then press play again so you can check to see if you filled the two formulas in correctly. Remember to look at the quadrant of the half angle when determining whether or not the radical is positive or negative. Okay, so we have, if you notice, I have positive the radical for both of these, 1 minus negative 2/3 and 1 plus negative 2/3 all over 2. So let's talk about why I chose the positive in each of the plus or minus the roots. Remember that this sign is dependent on the quadrant of the half angle. This information shows that the whole angle is between pi over 2 and pi. And pi over 2 to pi represents quadrant 2. So the whole angle is in quadrant 2. The half angle would take the value of x and divide it in half. So we can say that half of Q2 or half of 2 is 1. So if we divide an angle in quadrant 2 by 2, it pushes us into the first quadrant, and all the values in the first quadrant are positive. So from here, it's just a matter of simplifying. I know that minus a negative is plus a positive. 1 plus 2/3 is 3/3 plus 2/3, which is 5/3 divided by 2. To divide, we keep it, switch it, and flip it. And when the reciprocal of 2 is 1/2. So that gives us the square root of 5 over 6. If you want to rationalize, you may. If we multiply top and bottom by the square root of 6, that would give us the square root of 30 divided by 6. 30 is 2 times 15, which will not reduce. Again, you do not have to rationalize. In the second one, a positive times a negative is a negative. And 1 is 3/3. 3/3 minus 2/3 is 1/3. And we keep it, switch it, flip it. And that would give us the square root of 1/6, which is the square root of 6 divided by 6. Remember, we can use the sine and cosine in order to calculate the tangent. And so for the half angle for tangent, we would divide the square root of 30 over 6 by the square root of 6 over 6. That's going to give us the square root of 30 divided by the square root of 6, which is the square root of 5. Please let me know if I've made any mistakes, but I think everything so far so good. Example B asks for the same information. So, but this time we notice if we're going to substitute in for cosine, we have to draw a triangle because we were not given the cosine at this time. So analyze the information, draw your triangle in the correct quadrant, and then turn the screencast back on to check your work, please. So we know that cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse, and if the So we know that cotangent is adjacent divided by opposite. So the adjacent leg is 6, the opposite is 1, and because it's going down, it would be negative. And then when we use the Pythagorean theorem, we get a hypotenuse of 37. So we know that we now have enough information to calculate the cosine. I want you to fill in both of these formulas and determine whether you will use the positive or the negative. Remember, that's dependent on the quadrant of the half angle. Please pause the screencast, turn it back on once you've filled in the formula. Okay, so we have 1 minus the cosine adjacent over hypotenuse, all divided by 2, and then 1 plus the cosine adjacent over hypotenuse, all divided by 2. Why do I have a positive in front of the radical for the half angle for sine and a negative for the half angle for cosine? This information tells me that the whole angle is in quadrant 4. Half of 4 is 2. So the half angle is in quadrant 2. Recall that in quadrant 2, sine is positive and cosine is negative. So to simplify these, you can find a common denominator, add like terms, divide by 2, or you can put that into your calculator and let it do the work for you. I know that my common denominator is going to be the square root of 37. And this is root 37 divided by root 37. So the square root of 37 minus 6, all divided by 2. And in order to divide by 2, I keep it, switch it, flip it, and multiply by 1/2. So this gives me my value for the half angle for cosine. You do not need to rationalize. That was the half angle for sine. My apologies for misspeaking. Here we have a negative, the square root of, my common denominator again is the square root of 37, root 37 plus 6. And in order to divide by 2, I would multiply this by the reciprocal. Let's use this to our advantage to find the half angle for tangent. Of course, in this case, you might think it's easier to use one of the formulas because this is the 2 complex fractions. So let's look at the formula. We have not used one of those yet. The half angle formula for tangent consists of this complex formula and then the 2 on the end that are less complex. If I were picking, I would pick either the second or the third formula so I didn't have to deal with radicals. I'm going to select the third, 1 minus cosine x divided by sine x. So let's expand that. 1 minus the cosine of x divided by the sine of x. Remember, you are still most welcome to use sine divided by cosine, but I just want to model using one of the formulas so you've got that available to you. So this is 1 minus the cosine of angle x, or in this case angle u, is adjacent over hypotenuse. So 6 divided by the square root of 37 divided by the sine of x, or in this case the sine of angle u, which is opposite over hypotenuse, negative 1 divided by the square root of 37. In order to simplify, I need a common denominator. So that's the square root of 37. That would make this new numerator root 37 minus 6, all divided by negative 1 over the square root of 37. And then to divide by fractions, I'll keep it, switch it, and flip it. So I will multiply by the reciprocal of the denominator. So these will cancel. And our tangent is negative square root of 37. A negative divided by a negative would give us plus 6. And again, if you divided these two, you probably have a different appearance of a solution. Remember just to find the decimal value to check. Thank you, ladies. I hope this helps you.